One of the biggest strengths of this film is that it's a climbing film that uses climbing as a mechanism rather than the ultimate subject. And I found this film is really a film about embracing contradiction. Dean is a visionary, but he's also reckless. And he's authentic, but he's self-promotional. And he's loving, but difficult. And a documentary is strongest when they let these contradictions exist and allow the viewers to create their own opinions. What's going on? I'm Morgan. I'm a documentary and commercial filmmaker, cinematographer, and I'm here today to discuss The Dark Wizard, the HBO Sender Films limited run documentary series following Dean Potter. Having the subject be someone who's passed away begs the question, who owns the story? This is an HBO project. And usually with these outdoor sports documentaries, they're sponsored by outdoor retailers like Patagonia, the North Face, that can tend to influence the storytelling. Whereas this can be like an unfiltered look into the psyche of one of the most divisive characters in climbing history and climbing lore. I'm a little bit hesitant to say that The Dark Wizard is a Sender Films film. It's more of a Sender Films editorial accomplishment. Really kudos to the edit team who was able to string together such a vast library of archival into a very cohesive story that was extremely compelling. The documentary repeatedly creates this unbearable tension around these events where the outcome is known. Even when you know the outcome, it's hard to watch, wondering how he was going to survive. One thing I found interesting here was this Darkness Thesis. The film frames him as a bit of a wild card and a bit of a rebel. For instance, on his free solo of the Eiger, the film or photographer Jim Hurst has to rescue him and they have an altercation on the mountainside, but it seems like I would probably be a little bit on edge too if I was free soloing the Eiger. Does the Darkness Thesis match the evidence given? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I feel like they force you to draw these conclusions when I'm like, I'd rather draw those conclusions myself. The story of this documentary was exceptionally strong. You want to watch this thing from start to end without stopping, as I did. But my biggest critique here is that the modern day cinematography doesn't match the intentionality of the rest of the piece. When I watch a HBO documentary like this, I really want the interviews to feel like they're all part of the same film. They lacked an identity, a cohesive vision of cinematography. I'm just gonna dive in on a couple right now. All right, we're diving in on Jim Hurst here first. The set dressing, these cables are distracting over here. This box is truly a non-starter for me. This whole wall is just so blank. I feel like they want this pelican, stacked pelican, crowded gear room vibe, but they're not getting it with this frame. Moving on. Okay, we're diving in on the Tim O'Neill tight angle here. The lighting feels unmotivated. There's no windows or anything in the frame. And then the thing that gets me about this is just the insane amount of negative space here. The frame feels really flat. There's no depth to it. Moving on. We got Brad here. It's shot in an Airstream. It just feels cramped and strange. This guitar, there's just so much set dressing in all these interviews that take me out of the story. I don't think there's any guitars in this whole story. So why is it featured so prominently in these interviews? I don't know. Okay, we're diving in on Rick Ridgway here. This is actually a really strong frame. I do really like this frame, but at the same time, going back to the cohesive vision for cinematography across the project, this comes out as random to me just because look at the insane amount of headroom here. He's filmed dead center in this ultra mega wide interview setup, an otherwise awesome frame. And if they did everyone along these lines, I would be psyched. I feel like the interviews for a documentary like this are essentially the backbone or the engine of your story. And there was no unified point of view while capturing these interviews. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. So diving in on the end of the documentary here, they really build up the wingsuiting accident, and I really feel like they handled it very tastefully. But the part that almost loses me is the very, very end, the B-roll with Jen and the Raven. If they had showed the final iPhone clip of the wingsuit with the Raven coming into frame, I could have ended on that. In conclusion, this film, it isn't about darkness, it isn't about climbing, it's really about embracing contradiction. And I think that it really walks that line incredibly well. The structure and editing of this film was its greatest accomplishment, very solid A territory. The tension and story, I would say, is another very strong A- category. Dean is maybe one of the most interesting people you could make a film on. He remains complicated, but he's neither a hero nor a villain, and so I'm giving this very solid A territory. Excellent music choices, their choices in when not to use music were incredibly strong. For instance, with the Free Rider Free solo, there was a noticeable lack of music. I'm going to give that a solid A rating. For the cinematography of this film, obviously most of it is archival, so it's really hard to judge based on that. But where the film could have elevated itself was these modern day interviews. You know where I stand on that. It may be a little bit harsh, but I'm going to be grading this at a solid C, C- level, just because of the missed opportunity. I think The Dark Wizard really succeeds in being a compelling narrative piece. I'm going to land in a solid A- B+ range for this thing. Given the shortcomings with the cinematography, it was an incredible editorial achievement. Kudos to Sender Films for bringing this project to life and telling this incredible story. What did you think of it? Let me know. Thanks.